All right, guys, Sydney Brown here, back again with another chapter of Memoir Mastery, a step-by-step guide to writing your story. And if you are ready, we're going into chapter 5 now, talking about setting the scene, writing descriptive settings and context. This is going to be going into the next level. And if you are following along, I'd appreciate it if you would like the videos. Go ahead and subscribe, and most importantly, comment below and let me know that you've subscribed. Let me know if you have any questions. You're also going to find a free writing group where you can come over on Facebook and interact with us, and we'll do some questions and answers and things like that there as well. Don't hesitate to reach out, and we look forward to seeing you in the class. All right, so let's start talking about descriptive settings and context. Now, section 1 of this chapter, we're going to talk about the importance of setting. Now, if you're ready to learn about the importance of setting in a memoir story specifically, let's go ahead and get started. The setting in a memoir story is kind of like the backdrop of a painting. You know, it's the context that surrounds the experiences, and it helps create a more immersive and vivid experience for your readers. Here's just a few ways that we can get a little bit deeper in that by using your setting. All right, number 1, it creates a sense of place. Now, I know that seems obvious because we're talking about settings, but there's a couple different ways that we can talk about place. One is your emotional place, you know, my place in this world, which is your feeling of attachment, but also your literal place, where if you are giving that context to your reader of what room you're in or what state you're in or what, you know, atmosphere you're in, then that is a literal place, but both of them work hand in hand. As a reader, you want a little bit of both. So make sure that you set your location, that you tell your reader where you are. You want to go into enough emotion and enough description without being too much, though. Number 2, it adds depth and richness to your story. Now, by that, what I mean is it actually enhances your reader's mood and the tone of the story by using these layers of, you know, if you talk about how you dim the lights, when you read the words dim the lights, your reader is automatically going to understand, okay, so they're either tired, they have a migraine headache, or they're about to get romantic. You know, there's only a few scenarios where when they read, they dim the lights, that your reader is going to start making some emotional assumptions. Number 3, it sets the stage for the experiences. Now, let's talk, you know, because you want your readers to understand the context and the background of your story. Let's say that, you know, a person is going through a really rough time and they want to, maybe they're considering suicide, and, you know, they take their car at dusk over to this cliff that is well known as, you know, the place where cars drive off the edge and don't return. If you write that in there, you know, about this cliff that's well known, and you draw that picture for your reader, the reader is automatically going to start feeling, you know, the heaviness in the protagonist who is going through that. So when you do that, make sure that you set the stage for the experiences too, because that actually will help them get there without you even using the words. Number 4, it takes and it creates a sense of nostalgia. So, you know, you can transport them back to a different time, a different place, help them remember their own experiences during that time. Now, I'm not saying everybody is going to be in this era, but what if, you know, what if someone talked about the 1920s or the Great Depression, or the Korean War, or, you know, the first perfect pitch game, you know, anything like that. those things, those big things will automatically, trigger emotions in your readers. There's people that will talk about all of these major time frames where something big happened, and your reader will instantly go there with you. So use what you have to bring them there faster, so that, like I've said, you don't have to write 100 words if you can draw them a picture with 10 words. Number 5, it can reflect your internal landscape. Now, what I mean by that is it actually can help convey your emotions and your feelings and add a deeper layer of meaning to your story. If you're talking about, you're sitting in your room and you've got your windows closed and the curtains are drawn and it's dark and it's drab, they know you're in a dark place. They know you're not, singing and dancing around your room. So that set, drawing that picture, that visual, really helps your reader. Number 6, it can create tension and conflict. For example, if your story takes place in a turbulent or dangerous environment, this can create a sense of danger and uncertainty for the readers. Let's say, your character is going into a nuclear plant. They're going to know, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why are they talking about this? There's probably something that is going to happen. What's going to happen? I wonder, is this somewhere back when there was a major leak? What's going on here? They're going to instantly start, in their mind, trying to figure out what it is you're getting at, because you're not going to talk about them going to a nuclear plant if something's not going to happen, right? So you draw that picture. Number 7, it creates a sense of time and history. It can help you anchor your story to a particular era. We kind of talked about that, the time period, and provide that important context for your experiences. So again, if you talked about, the Great Depression, and how you would, you were a small child or something like that, and you remember days of not eating, but everybody didn't eat, but at least you made it, something like that. You could draw that visual of being hungry, and different things. Number 8, it can be a character in itself. Now, this one's a little bit weird, and I remember the first time that I heard this, I thought, well, that's crazy. How can your setting be a character? But it really can. If you think of, let me think. There's like a Will Smith movie. I don't remember what that one was called, but where he's basically alone on the planet, and it's him and his dog, and it's the end of the world. That setting is the nemesis, the setting in survival, and all of those monsters out there. That's the character that he's fighting against. So in that aspect, your setting actually can be a character. So keep that in mind. If it's your battle against a setting, then absolutely take that and run with it. Number 9, it can help create a mood. And obviously we've talked about this all the way through, but it really does. Writing out your setting and drawing those visuals for your reader will help put them instantly into the mindset and the mood, the emotions that you're trying to get them to. If it takes them to a dark place, a foreboding emotion, it can create the sense of tension and suspense. You want to do that. That's a really, really great way to use your words to hone straight in on where you want your readers to be. And then number 10, it can inspire creativity. The setting of your memoir, and it doesn't have to be the whole memoir. It can be, just a scene, just one little scene can have this setting here, and that will, create and inspire creativity. It can spark your imagination and help you come up with new ideas and perspectives for your story. So make sure and I believe if you're following me, and make sure you subscribe, by the way, if you're following me, you've probably already heard me talk about how just getting the details can help, but don't over detail things, because you want your reader to get engaged, and they get engaged the best not when you tell them every single detail, but they get engaged when you tell them just enough to get them on their own journey with you. So remember, setting is absolutely important. It's a vital part of your memoir, and it adds depth and richness to your experiences. It creates a more immersive experience for your readers. I really think that once you get started on creating your settings, you're going to be addicted. It's an amazing feeling to be able to take something that's flat and then make it come to life. So get out there, have some fun, and let your creativity soar. Okay, so now we're going to move into using historical context effectively. It's really, really important to pull some things that everybody knows existed into your story, because that will almost immediately anchor them to what you're about to tell them about. So if you're ready to get started on that, let's jump right in. But using historical context effectively, keyword, in your memoir is like seasoning a dish with the perfect blend of spices. Before, when we were talking about vivid words, we added some salt and some pepper, but now we're going to add, let's add some cayenne and some garlic or something to really bring the flavor home. When you do this, it adds more depth, more richness to your story, just like it would, your meal. It helps your readers understand the culture of the time, the social, the pressures, the expectations, the norms, and the political forces that shaped you as a person, but also just the time. So it's really important that you start integrating some historical information as well. Let's talk about a few reasons why you want to do that. Now, one, obviously, it provides that important context. It helps your readers understand the events and the experiences that shaped the person that you've become. There's so many things. I've done some research and been down my rabbit holes, and I'm going to try to keep on target with this rather than going off on a tangent, to be honest. But there's so much, historically speaking, that when you tag something historical, your reader, if they're the same even remotely the same demographic as you, then they're going to be able to associate that. But it adds depth and richness to your story. When you tell just a story, I was 17 and I fell in love, and we got married and we had a baby, and there's your story, and you're telling a story. But when you show that story, you're going to add that depth, and you're going to tell them, this is what was going on in the world. Maybe it was in the free love moments, and maybe you didn't know who the father of your baby was. It doesn't matter what your story is. Just draw the pictures and let people remember, even if we only remember from the news, or we get onto YouTube and do some research ourselves. It's really great to add that depth to it. And then also it creates a sense of nostalgia. I just saying free love, I start thinking, there's Woodstock, there's the Forrest Gump movie, all these different things in my mind just started taking off. And if you put something like that in your memoir, your reader is going to have that same reaction. They're going to automatically start cranking their wheels again and remembering things, and they'll start to feel nostalgic. So even if they don't immediately feel something for your story yet, as long as you put them in a place where they can start the emotions flowing, then your words and your story will bring them into your story better. It creates a sense of time and history. Now, when you do this, it's really important because it helps to anchor your story to a particular era. You know, if you, gosh, let's say in the 50s, you know, like some people remember Happy Days, the TV show, and some people will remember the 50s as life, you know, their teenage years. So it just depends on what your own experience is. But if you anchor that into a generation or an era, then your reader will get there with you. And next, it helps your readers understand your experiences better. So you might talk about, and I'm just throwing stuff out here. If you talk about, you know, going to the doctor and getting on birth control, you know, maybe this is a time, you know, let's say it's in the 40s or the 50s, and getting on birth control. I'm not even sure if it existed, to be honest with you, but you know, whatever the method was at the time, uh, maybe back then it was shunned on, and you shouldn't have been on birth control because that meant you were, you know, a loose person or something like that. When you create that extra depth in your story, your readers are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it was like that back then. You know, whether they lived it or they're learning it, it you're choosing the historical milestones will actually really help them hone in on how you felt at the time. Number 6, it adds authenticity to the story. And this is absolutely true. You know, there's a song, Alan Jackson, talking about the space shuttle that falls out of the sky. I literally was just watching a YouTube thing, and I was in high school, and I remember how emotional it was and how awful it was. But it didn't really impact my life personally at the time. So as I watched the play of it just now, I actually teared up because at my age now, I understand the impact differently. So what this does is when you're giving a little bit of your story and you're putting something that's happened in the news in that story, then your reader is going to be able to, you know, be like, oh my gosh, yeah, if she went through this at that time, then that's probably what she was thinking. And yeah, I can totally understand that. And when I say all of this, I want you to understand it's not that your reader is dissecting and figuring out and trying to figure out if you're lying or not. It's more subconscious. So when your reader hears something, they just automatically associate it and move on. They're not, you know, looking for holes in your story. They're just looking for a way to get further in there with you and to take that journey with you. Number 7, it can highlight social issues. Now, historical context can also really drive home the social issues that were prevalent during that time period. Again, you know, I talked kind of like about the birth control and that being shunned on at a certain time frame, or you know, living with someone before you were allowed, before you're married, or having a, you know, multiple marriages, you know, where you've been divorced. And, you know, if there was a time where it was till death do you part. And then it became until you were tired of each other, or until things got hard, or until someone cheated or someone broke up. And things changed. But if you put that time frame into it, back to when it was until death do you part, you understand why some of the women put up with the abuse and some of the women put up with the cheating and different things like that. Now, I say women, but it could have very well been on both sides. So I'm not trying to be discriminative about that. But just be aware that using this as a technique really can help your reader get there with you faster. Number 8, it just creates a more engaging experience, and that really is the entire goal, is to get your reader engaged. Pull them in. First, you got to hook them, pull them in, hold their attention, and make sure they're feeling the emotions with you. It can inspire curiosity, and this is exactly what I'm just saying. What you write, if it's historical, may actually make someone go to YouTube and start down a different rabbit hole and say, gosh, I didn't even really remember anything about, the Berlin Wall, or whatever, the example would be. And then they might start researching and watch other videos and learn things that make their lives fuller for having that extra understanding or education. So when you inspire that curiosity, it's actually a really, really great feeling for your reader, even though it has nothing to do necessarily with your journal or your memoir. It benefits your reader in multiple ways. So the last thing I've got here is that it makes your story more universal. When I say that, what I mean is it helps your readers know how your experiences are connected and how it impacted you, and how overall many people went through that same thing. The divorcees, that was a whole generation when people started getting divorced. That was an entire movement of when people said, I'm not putting up with this just because, and it can make it more relatable, and you become part of a movement instead of just your own single story. So just remember, guys, using the historical context effectively is a vital part of creating a compelling and meaningful memoir. I am certain you can do it. Just do some time, spend brainstorming, figure out what was going on in the world around you. Make sure that your story is your story, but you share what was going on in your entire world. All right, guys, go out there, have some fun, and let the creativity soar. Okay, so now we're going into section 4, and we're going to talk about the top 10 techniques for writing about places and times. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a summary, but I need you to really pay attention, make sure that this is all gelling, because this is where things start to come together. Once you really get this understood, then you're going to be able to be in the drafting mode and then fully editing to know what's going to make or break your memoirs. So here we go. Writing, obviously, about a place and a time in your memoir is like painting a picture, a 3D picture, but with words. Now, we've talked about taking something flat and giving it the dimension. It's the exact same thing. It allows your readers to experience the senses that they contain. So they can see it, they hear it, they smell, they taste, they feel the experiences in a more immersive and a vivid way. So here's some techniques that you can use to bring your setting to life. Number 1, use the sensory details. Use the sensory details so that your readers experience the place, the time, the whole environment of what you're writing about. Describe the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, and the textures. Describe them in words and emotional words, both. Number 2, describe the culture and the social norms. By doing this, and this is kind of what I just talked about, when you describe the culture and the social norms of the place, like getting on birth control, by the way, I did look it up, and birth control oral contraceptives, they were released in 1950, I believe it was. So yes, they did exist in the 50s, so my example is valid. But if you were one of those first people in the 50s to get on birth control, maybe you were married or maybe you weren't, but you were one of those women who went out on the limb and said, I'm going to take control of my reproduction. that was a movement. That was a whole life thing. And using the cultural norms and, all of that to describe the time really will catapult your personal story into, more of, like I said, a movement effect. Um, Incorporate historical events. Now, this would be, talking about Woodstock or something, it's an actual event, something like, the space shuttle or the Berlin Wall. It's bringing all those individual things. Someone can say, okay, that was 1987, whatever the case would be. They would immediately then try to remember themselves in 1987, and they would be, even if they don't completely relate to you, they would relate your life then to their life then, and it's kind of exciting to get the reader's mind moving that way, because eventually they want to get right there with you. So help them with the steps on the way. Obviously, again, using dialogue, internal dialogue of your own, or dialogue between you and others, to show your readers what your language was back then, and what was in your mind, and how did you act back then. Dialogue is extremely powerful. And then, as I always say, show don't tell, because when you show, you're giving the readers the place, the time. Instead of saying, it was a really bad time to be a woman in the 50s, whatever it is you felt, color that, give it depth. Use metaphors and symbolism, use humor, because as we've always talked about, the use of humor is very important to break up the tense moments, but also sometimes people just want to laugh. So let them laugh, give them the happy moments, as well as the stressful, or the obstacles that you had to come through. Use research, and this is really important. You may not think, well, you might say, it was my life. Obviously, I don't need to research my life, but you do, because what you recall may be different. And, I can give examples of times where I thought I totally knew, and I would have sworn, let's say the movie Footloose. Footloose came out in 1982. I just made that up. But I might swear that it came out in 1982, but if I Googled it or YouTubed it and found out that it was wrong, because all my memories of what I thought was 1982 were tied up in that movie, when you actually do the research, and maybe it was 1983, maybe it was 1979, I don't know, it wasn't, but doing that research confirms, and it keeps you from giving bad information of historical events, because if you give bad information of historical events, then your credibility is almost shot. Now, people will probably be forgiving, and they'll be like, yeah, they should have researched that. They should have verified that. So do the research, do the verification, but don't leave it out. Just do a quick verification. It's very important that you have those things in there. But if you're going to quote a date, make sure it's right. Number 9, use contrast. When you use contrast to create a more dynamic, interesting portrayal of the place and the time that you're writing about, it can help your readers understand the differences and the similarities between your experience and what was going on as a whole. Like let's go back to, I keep talking about birth control or divorce, but in a time where women were not allowed, or were shunned on, if they were on birth control or getting a divorce. If you talk about that, if you talk about, out of you and your 10 best friends, you were the only one divorced, you were the only one who didn't have 6 kids by the time you were 26, something like that. When you use that contrast of you against everyone else and you give that emotion, then it's actually really going to help your reader understand, because they weren't there necessarily. They may be younger or older than the generation that you grew up in. And so it's important that you give that contrast to who was already there with you, so that they can understand how your life and their life, or their understanding of that time frame, would be different. And then, finally, use personal experiences. Now, obviously, this is your personal memoir, so you're going to use the personal experiences, but use them and don't be afraid. Even if it's talking about going for an ice cream with your dad, share those moments, share the feelings and the things that really meant something to you. Share how when he was gone, you still held on to those moments of going down to Pops Dairy Deli or something, and picking up an ice cream with them. Just giving that. Now, if there's a Pops Dairy Deli somewhere, and if other people have gone there with their dad, you're immediately gonna just like, oh my gosh, yeah, I totally relate to that. So just remember that writing about your place and your time of your story, of what you're, because most of us have been through, multiple decades, multiple generations, and your story could be about just this 5-year period of an 80-year-old life, whatever it is. So be very specific to what your story is, but use these techniques, really dig into the sights and sounds, the feelings, the emotions that surrounded that time frame in that place. And your reader is going to appreciate it, and you are going to get some love for it too. So now that you've got this, I promise you, you're really getting close to being able to just get through this. I do urge you to keep writing, your drafts and stuff, but go ahead and finish the course all the way through before you necessarily start building yours, because there is stuff that will come on later that you really should have that bigger view first. Anyway, definitely make sure you subscribe, and we will catch you on the next lesson.